Hi everyone, welcome to the Mutant Watch show of this week that is called The Many Lives of X Factor, in which we're gonna touch into the different runs, the different eras of this book that just last week got a new release of a book written by Leah Williams and which the artist was David Baldeon and Matt has it right there. Okay, so I'm Duna, I'm the host of the show, and we have Matt, who just saw the comic, and
Hello.
Travis, and Gabriel,
Hello.
and Brian. Okay, and just before the show, I usually do this. I'm gonna keep doing it because it's important to give, uh, to showcase that the protests are still going on, and there's some hard things happening and some places that need special support. So I'm gonna put just the link right there so you can see the different places in need. It's blacklivesmatters.card.co, and it's like if you can go to a protest, go if there's in your area. If you can donate, support the protests that need face masks, that need some practical stuff that you're gonna find very easily in that link. So that's it. Okay, we can go now to the show, and we're gonna talk about X Factor. First, I wanna ask you all, what do you think X Factor is, stands for, means? What's the whole point of it? Why? Because I think there's some common stuff between the comics, and I think I would love to know if you all think something alike. So whoever wants to go first.
I think if you're looking for a common thread between all the different iterations of X Factor, it can be boiled down to mutants helping mutants. Not fighting for mutants, but helping mutants. And I think that's an important distinction. But that's my 2 cents.
That is actually much more altruistic than what I was thinking. To me, I always view X Factor in all the iterations as being more of kind of like a business. They're always working for someone, or they have a job that isn't just, hey, we're X-Men, whether it's for the government or for a separate company or a detective agency. It's more like a job than just you see on the rest of the titles.
I think there's some truth to that.
I actually 100% agree with Gabe because I was thinking about it earlier. And I was like, the one thing that they've always had is that they've been away from Charles Xavier's school. It's always been outside of it, whether if it's working for an industry or the government or what we're seeing now is even still a different job outside of the home, more or less.
Travis, how about you?
I don't really see a big connection between them, especially with the new series, which I know we'll talk about later. It feels to me like generally they just need to keep that trademark going. So every so often you just have a book, you call it X Factor.
Now, see, Gabe, that was cynical. There are also no lies whatsoever in that statement.
Okay, so my vision on this is I think there's something in common. I don't know if it's exactly that they're working for the government, but I think there's some cynicism attached to the comics of X Factor, something about mutants, doing some things that are ethically ambiguous or more like, showing a light that is like, not that they necessarily do ethically ambiguous things, but they are put in a position of doing things that are, for working for companies, working for money, for people that turn out to be bigots. A lot of times that happens in various runs, and also I think there's a big amount of melodrama. Like I think in the X-Men in general, there's a big amount of melodrama, but I keep going to these are some of the comics that have the most wild ideas like also most of the, the emotionally like too much ideas, and that's kind of what I feel for it. That's kind of what I feel. It's if there's a connected, if there's a feel to it, I feel it's that one, and I feel it happens. I don't know where we can talk about now, which which runs we like more, which iterations we like more, and also in this context, like if I explain myself well, in this context of like which run of X Factor impacted each one of you more and why, and which other runs you think have things in common, and just to get people, some people maybe watching this know who the X-Men are but don't know shit about X Factor. So maybe to get them into what things interest us, what's the point of reading these comics, which for me goes into this melodrama stuff, but maybe for some of you all come into other things. So that's my next question.
Well, that's a
I'll
deep question. Oh, go ahead, Gabe.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, so this is a very easy question for me, and that would be Peter David's X Factor Investigations, because that has just such a such a soft place in my heart. The way that Peter David just opens up, and I'm pretty sure on the first page, is Richter dealing with depression and on the verge of a suicide attempt, kind of like what Duna was saying. It hits the drama real fast, but it also addresses it kind of in a respectful way, which comics doesn't do often when it comes to mental health. It talks about all that he's lost and his grief, and then we see Richter throughout the comic grow and kind of heal from it. So for me, that really definitely hits heavy. Not to mention the whole fact that Peter David finally takes that step that Marvel has been avoiding and confirms that Richter is queer and in a relationship with Shatterstar. And just it was all very organic the way Richter grew in that comic, even though technically we can say that Multiple Man is the main character of the comic. Peter David didn't ignore any of the other characters. But as for aside from that, the why I think people should read it, give a crap about it, is it's much more grounded than the X-Men comic. They're not going off into space and fighting bug aliens. They are investigating, why this man might be thinking his wife is cheating on her and things like that. And then things get bizarre because they're mutants, and it's a comic book.
I think for me, my one that calls to mind, because I think how I got introduced to X Factor was through the animated series, when they all appeared and there was that scene with Havoc and Polaris and Iceman. So I think that was my first introduction. So I think that run probably holds the most nostalgic feeling for me. However, I just started reading X Factor Investigations. That's quickly becoming one of my all-time favorite. I read the original 1 through 25, where it was the E05. But I think that for nostalgic reasons, I'm going to have to go with the all-new team. But I'm also so loving the investigations because they're so deep-hitting. Like we're talking about Richter having, or, feeling suicide, contemplating suicide, feeling depression. And then we also have Jamie's personality that splits, who wants to murder people and stuff. So, I mean, right off the bat, we're hitting all kinds, and it has that drama of a TV show that where I wasn't able to stop reading. The only reason ended up stopping was because I had to go to bed. So, I mean, I don't know. It's a toss-up between my nostalgic feeling and what I'm really into right now. Because as me and Duna were talking before the show, she was saying that when we read something when we're younger, it has such a different impact than what we're reading now. I constantly read Age of Apocalypse. Like, I think I've read the full run like 5 times. I started rereading it recently, and I'm still picking up things that I never read the 5 other times. So, I mean, I just love comics. Yeah, that's all.
So it's hard to top X Factor Investigations era. It really is. Like it, and I think part of it is it sort of fulfilled the promise that Peter David's original X Factor run didn't get to because he was feuding with editorial and quit the book less than 20 issues in to his run. And here came X Factor Investigations, and they basically told him, hey, just do what you want. Have fun. Write a Peter David comic. And he did. And it didn't always work out. Like there's up and down patches throughout that run, but it's still a consistently good book that I would put in anybody's hands. But for me personally, that first run right there, and again, it comes down a lot to nostalgia reasons because it just takes me back to that time when I was first starting to not only read comics but really explore the world of the X-Men and get to know these characters and who they are and what their relationships are. And I mean, at the time that I first started reading that, I'd never read New Mutants, so I didn't know what Wolfsbane's deal was, who she is, anything like that. And Peter David just writes some of the finest character interactions that you can find anywhere. And that initial run is just chock full of excellent character work from start to finish. So
my sole allegiance in X Factor is to Louise Simonson, now currently Eisner Hall of Famer Louise Simonson. I have issues with the first Peter David run, which we can get into later. But for me, Wheezy, and when Walt Simonson was also there was a sensitivity in that comic that you didn't see in the other X books at the same time, or I think after. Rather than fights all the time, you had a lot of arguments going on. And so that's like we're all there for the fights. We're reading superhero comics. But occasionally, instead of beating each other up, you can just have an argument. And so characters had arguments, and they had their own, dynamics and agendas. But you also had the original X-Men forced into kind of very adult roles. And even though they weren't all parents, they're living in a small space with a bunch of teenagers who have real issues and things going on. You had Rusty and Skids in there. You had Richter in there. Boom Boom. These were characters coming from very different backgrounds than five people who had basically lived with a rich guy, all of their teenage years and had whatever it is they wanted out of that. They didn't really want for much in those terms. And so that, to me, even when I reread it now, has a lot of energy to it.
I think I want to go with Louise Simonson, with Wizzy Run also, because I think it holds a more special place in my heart. Also, because there's a lot of things. I read it when I was 14 and 15, so it just came to me very closely. But also, I didn't really read it fully. I have realized doing some rereads that I read it more picking single issues at comic shops and just investigating what was all about those characters. And I like that. As opposed to the X-Men books, which usually are centered about these figures that are superheroes, that are I don't know, figures that do something super important. The first X Factor run focuses on the Morlocks and on mutants that are teenagers that are not necessarily trained to be superheroes, that are just teenagers that are trying to survive and do their thing, and focuses a lot on them. And I think what Travis just said about this explores the insecurities and also the traumas of people like Rusty, like Skids, like Richter, Boom Boom, which all were characters very different to what the X-Men books were offering. And I think they connect somehow with what Louise Simonson did in New Mutants, her style of writing, but it feels more like people you just find and people you just share stories with most times that the New Mutants felt, even if New Mutants is like one of my favorite books ever. And I don't know, I also feel like one of the reasons why I feel there's some kind of connection between the different X Factors runs and the team is like Louis Simonson got these 5 teenagers that were, the original five that were now grown ups, and that were like very, I don't know, seen in a very sparkly, shiny light. Like they were like the perfect people. I don't know, they felt like that, and put them through a lot of processing their trauma and going through a lot of stuff. She created Archangel. Is that I don't know if this is a way to pronounce it, but she created Archangel from Angel, and that was like a big thing into what these teenagers have to face as trauma that got processed as adults, and that went with Jean and Madeline Pryor and with Cyclops, and there's a lot of character deconstruction here. Like we see them more as real persons that we saw them in the X-Men, and that's part of the melodrama, and that's part of what I think Peter David tried to bring back. Is like try to get into his characters, into Jamie, into a strong guy, and people like that were like some kind of stereotypes or some kind of, and try to get into who are these people, what are they suffering, what are they going through. And I don't know, I guess that's what I found valuable, and that you can get if you go to read X Factor versus if you read other X stuff, that you're gonna get a lot of melodrama, but that also means you're gonna get a lot of character talk, a lot of people talking about things that are not necessarily superhero things. And I don't. Okay.
Oh no,
Go.
I wanted to touch on something that both you and Travis talked about, and particularly about Louise Simonson and her writing. And I just got to thinking about it. If you look at the just X-Men in the 80s, she's writing, more books than Claremont at the time. And she never gets the props that she deserves for helping mold X-Men in that world. But I mean, she's writing X Factor. She writes the latter half of New Mutants, and that's incredible. And yet she still winds up dwelling in Claremont's shadow all the time. But I feel like that the sensitivity, like what you said, Travis, that she brought to especially these younger characters, is as much of an important hallmark for X-Men as anything else that Claremont and Byrne did. And that's my 2 cents. And I'm just happy to see that Louise Simonson, finally getting a little bit of respect there at the Eisners. And so yeah.
Oh, kind of going off of that, with what you was also saying, Duna, about the original run having so much focus on the trauma and them going through it and everything. I'm not as familiar with the early X Factor as some of you other guys, but everything that you were saying, it can kind of go on to what you was to X Factor investigations as well, with how they tackle these deep subjects. And with the concept of Leah Williams' new run at X Factor, it is very likely that she could continue that trend and that vibe, rather, of focusing on these deep issues in the context of an X-Men comic.
Yeah, totally.
And also, like, I want to point out, because this is a thing I find a lot online, and I don't know, it just enrages me, so I'm gonna bring it into the world, that Louise Simonson wrote those issues of X Factor from the 6 to the 65 by her own, and some people somehow think that Walter Simonson collaborated in the writing, which is not at all. Like it didn't happen at all, like anywhere. But some people like to elevate male figures, like Walter Simonson is rightfully the idol of a lot of people because of his art, but he didn't do the writing there. I know he did the writing in other places and not in X Factor, and that's something that Luis said many times, that people believe that because they're married, Walter was also writing or something, and I feel like that's just kind of male chauvinism of like, you know, there has to be a man doing something here which there wasn't in the writing. And personally, my favorite issue, I don't know which issue is, I think it's around from 17 to 20 something, is the one that has art with June Birman, who also did the art of Powerback, and that is very beautiful in art and in writing. So I don't know, I'm just trying to give props. Like Louis Amazon was such an important figure, and the times have also shaped how we view people creating things. And you know, people created things in a way that is more I don't know how to say it, but less than likely than some people think about those things.
Well, I think, you know, with Uncanny too, back in the day, she edited a long stretch there, and I don't, you know, I think she doesn't get props for how much she did as an editor, for coordinating the X stuff and for working with Claremont. We like the idea of certain figures being auteurs or being on their own, but I don't think that you get 80s Claremont without Louise Simonson. I don't think you get 80s Louise Simonson without Chris Claremont.
Yep. And I also don't think you don't get any of those without Ann Nocenti, who was editing also, which is also an incredible figure that people sometimes forget. She was the editor of most of those X issues.
I didn't realize she was an editor.
Yes, she came as an editor.
Oh, wow.
I think for most of the first part of X Factor, most of the part of Uncanny, that is like around 100 or so from on, and I don't know, and New Mutants too. And all these little ideas also like Exterminators, which also was written by Louis Simonson, and Fallen Angels and all other stuff was the editorial work of Ann Nocenti, so like that's also a props.
You know, I haven't actually read Exterminators, so I don't really know how that ties into everything.
I think it's pretty much, I don't want this to turn into a talk about Inferno. Yeah, some other day we're gonna talk about Inferno and I'm gonna come here as an expert or something. But I think it's very important for reading Inferno, but it's not like very much for X Factor stuff. Except the fact that this was the miniseries that made all these young people that Travis and me were talking about, Rusty, Skids, Boom Boom, and Richter, leave
and
the X Factor.
Yeah, WizKid.
Yes, leave X Factor and go to New Mutants. This was the miniseries that did that storyline.
Okay.
It was sort of an X Factor New Mutants crossover, but with side characters.
Cool.
That's it. Okay, now we're talking about characters. I'm gonna ask everyone who are their favorite character of X Factor. I know some responses already.
I think I might be one of those. So I'll just come out and say it, and that is Richter. If we have regular watchers who have not realized my obsession with Richter, because every episode I pitch the Richter Shatterstar mini by Steve Orlando. If that didn't make it clear that he's one of my favorite, not just X Factor characters or X-Men characters, but Marvel characters in general. So that's pretty much a given.
I'm gonna wait a little and show some comments by Ross, who commented on the YouTube, and I want to showcase them here. Appreciation for Louis Simonson and for Ann Nocenti too. So like, I don't know, that was like, I found out. And hi, Rose, and we love you. And okay, you can keep going with the characters.
So I really love, Wheezy's Beast, especially. Her version of Beast kind of combined what I had liked in earlier runs and things I've liked explored since, but especially how bipolar he was and self-sabotaging he was when he loses his intelligence really hit me in a big way. And when he's feeling that he can compensate in some way for what other people aren't seeing as inadequacies, but he's seeing as inadequacies, both as a superhero and a scientist and intellectual, but also in his dating life. That relationship with Trish during X Factor, it's very romantic, it's very sweet, it's very, very desperate, right? Here is this watch in which I am emblazoned on, and it will allow you to contact me. That's like giving somebody a cell phone with your photo on the cover of it, on the screen of it, and like, please, you can call me with this. Please call me. So Beast in that run really affected me in a big way.
I'm going to go with Multiple Man because really prior to his involvement in X Factor, he was something of a blank slate as far as characterization goes. I mean, yeah, he was around. He was the guy that can make duplicates of himself, and that's really cool. But there just wasn't a whole lot that had been done with him on a personal level. And just watching that character grow and change throughout the course of X Factor is really phenomenal in my mind. So I think he's my favorite. Plus, he has a great sense of humor.
I'll go ahead and go. So the whole time you guys are talking, I was like, oh, I was not ready for that question. Who is my favorite? I had to go with Polaris. Like, she's kind of, for me, the staple of what makes X Factor. I don't feel like you can have a team without her. However, that was also before I started reading Investigations, which you have M, you have Siren, Banshee. So I don't know. I'm gonna have to stick with Polaris just because I think there's so many different levels. She's like Shrek. She has a bunch of she's like an onion. You can peel her. Like there's so many different ways that you can go with her character. Also, I mean, not to give too much away with the new story, but there's also some characters that could very easily take over that for myself. So we'll see. That will have to come back to.
Oh, I'm left. Okay, so I was gonna say Boom Boom because I love her. And she's like, I identify with her so much. Like, I don't know. She's like, nah. But she cares so much. She cares deeply, but she doesn't show it most times. And I like that. I like that about her character. And I like that it shows in a macro level, she cares deeply about things that happens to other mutants, but she's so stressed with it that she usually just comes off as sarcastic. And I like those kind of traits that are very like identifiable for me when I read these books as a teenager. But if I have to go with one that I think it's the one that I feel like, I don't know, should be developed more, and I also feel like I have gotten close to liking more with the years, is Richter. Like I have to be with Gabriel there because I feel, I don't know, I feel like I was reading this old X Factor when he starts appearing, and there's so much that makes sense about Richter being very traumatized and going through a lot of stuff, and there's so much that is so sympathetic about that. That's a thing about Louise Simonson. I'm gonna sour her with love here. That she's very good at making characters sympathetic when they suffer. Like she does that with Skids, even with Madeline Pryor, which is supposedly a villain. She does that with her, and she definitely does that with Richter. And I feel like that's greatly. I don't know. There are a lot of stuff which I'm gonna ask you about, and we're gonna talk later, that I particularly don't like about the Peter David new run, but I definitely like how he took that part of Richter and made it bigger. Like, there's a reason, if you read the first times that Richter appears, that Richter is thinking about killing himself when it begins that book. Like, not only the reasons are specific to his situation in that moment, but his life. And I feel that's great. That's a deep characterization. I don't know. I want to see more of him, and I want to see him written by other people that explore that in other ways. Because I love how Luis explored it, but we can have other people explore it in other ways. So I don't know. I just agreed with Gabriel and last hour. Okay, so now that we got the characters, what I'm gonna ask you for the next one is what are some stuff that of X Factor, because I know of all things, these books don't leave anyone indifferent. Like, they're not gonna do it. I don't think any of those runs is gonna leave anyone indifferent if they invest time in them. So, like, what things suck you, or what things impact you, make you fell in love or fell for it, or even feel like this is weird or whatever, and what other things made you feel like they didn't land on you? I don't know. It's more like about feelings, because I feel a lot of things happen in these books that are very impactful, and I want to know how things are impacted you all. I'm gonna...
So for me, I think my favorite, or the one that impacted me the most, was because it was during Legion Quest, right before the Age of Apocalypse started. I think it was my first X Factor book. So I think for me, that had the most impact. That's what drew me in and made me continue to buy it. Like, I can't remember anything particular about that issue other than I was super excited and it was action-packed. It was different than any other X title that I was reading at the time. But it also had that, like, almost like the Melrose Place, Beverly Hills 90210, like, melodrama behind it. And I was like, what is this? I need to know more of this. I'm 9 years old. This is incredible. So for me, that's what kept me coming back. And then there was like a gap between my reading years, which was unfortunately during the whole run of X Factor Investigations, or else I feel like during that time I would probably have said that one. But nostalgia.
It's a good question. I'm as just a reader in general, I'm always character first. Like, you can give me the most original plot in the world, but if I don't care about the people in it, then my interest is going to quickly dwindle. So, I think one of the running hallmarks of X Factor in just about every iteration has been the strong character work, and I don't believe that's anywhere more on display than in the classic X Factor number 87, Examinations by Peter David and Joe Quesada, where all of the team members go to see Doc Samson for a little psychiatric checkup. And it's just so revealing all throughout the issue. And I mean, we can quibble a little bit about, that's not the most accurate representation of psychiatry in the world, but it's also a 22-page comic. So I can give it some slack in that regard. But just the way it's set up and the way that it reveals things that we might not think about with some characters. Like, for example, Quick is all written like a dick, right? That's just who he is. And he lets his guard down at one point, and he's like, imagine you're standing in line at the ATM and you're behind someone that doesn't know how to work it, and it's taking forever, and you're just getting more and more impatient. That's my entire life. And it's like, that just says so much about who Quicksilver is as a character. And that issue is just chock full of awesome moments like that. So that's the one for me. and I think there's a sequel somewhere in X Factor Investigations that's also does basically the same thing. It's just not quite as good because we've seen the trick done before. But that's my one right there.
I think I already spoke about the one that I found to be the most impactful, which was Richter coming out. But that aside, I think X Factor Investigations have a lot of little moments. They may not be runs, but they are conversations. They are moments between people. And for me, one of the biggest ones has to be the conversation between Monet and Darwin, where she calls him out on his internalized racism. And how the reason why he looks so pale in his default form is that because he is trying to protect himself from being discriminated against for being black. And I think that that was such a powerful view on a character that was mostly a blank slate up to that point, that it was unexpected and it hit heavy. Also, another big one is Siren and everything she had went through with the death of her father, and then on top of that, what happened with her son. And it was just a heavy emotional oh shit moment. I dropped the comic the first time I got to that page. It was definitely heavy hitting.
So for me, I have two examples, and they're very different directions. The first is from the Simonson run, the arc Judgment War, where they are taken to another. The team is taken to another planet. Some of them are amnesic, and they're all really separated from their lives and their responsibilities and their dynamics. And it was really fascinating to me. And that was when I read, like, I was probably like 8 or 9 years old when I first read it. And it kind of blew me away that if you take away the debts, basically, and the relationships in someone's life, they could be a whole other person. And how they would shape that. They may not be a better person, but they could be a different person. And so that had a big impact on me in a positive way, in a very freeing way. The other end is early in Peter David's original run, around the time of the Hulk crossover and involving the Hulk crossover. He is trying to hit as many hot button things as he can. And so there's a vein of Islamophobia that comes into that Hulk crossover that infuriated me as a kid. At the same time, Rain had just been tortured and brainwashed into being Havoc's sex slave. And Rain, for listeners who don't recall necessarily, was at that time a young teenager still. And so a young teenage girl who has been tortured and brainwashed to be a sex slave of a grown man, and Havoc gives her so much shit for that. And why can't she get over it? Polaris as well. And that pissed me off as a kid. It pisses me off now, but as a kid, it was like, these were like real people, you know. And so that part of that run probably pissed me off more than any X book has succeeded in doing. And it was not in ways that I think Peter David intended for the book to upset me. So I had a very positive emotional response to one and a very constructive but negative to the other.
Okay, I'm gonna go with two also. And then we have some comments, so I'll read it later. But when I'm gonna go with two. One of them is in the original Louis Simonson run, which there's some. I have reread it those days, and it's like I have reread like all along, so I don't remember the issues. But it was like a moment in which Richter and Skids and Rusty go to fix a park that Iceman has frozen. And it's sweet because like it's sweet but also kind of sad as the run develops, because they're seeing how the world portrays mutants as bad, as people that are not reliable as people. They see that and they hate that, so they try to do something positive and showcase it to the world. And they do, with the eyes that is left, they do a message of like something like, these are the seeds of mutants, these are what mutants do, and what they did was fix a park. And on one side it plays into the whole like, we do nice things so respects us stuff that I kind of hate, but also I kind of like how lately in the run it's so that there's kind of not a hope in what they did there, because the person that Angel was working for was finally a massive bigot that just wanted to eliminate mutants. So the thing is, they are kind of working in the name of that organization also, and they kind of later receive the seeds of that and have to go through the Mutant Registration Act and everything. And it's kind of so how these teenagers live with this desperation of, we just want people to know that we're humans too, and how they do it and how they express that. It touched me, not exactly because it was perfect, but also I think Louis Emerson wasn't trying to say like, this is how you do things. It was more like, this is how they're trying to do things. And it probably fails again, and you fall and you wake up again, and you fall and you wake up again. And I like that idea that went for some time on that run, and that connected with what Angel felt, that made him like hate humans for a long while, and in a way that is understood. And that's part of the Archangel story, and I recommend that run so much because of that story. I think it's very well done. And now I'm gonna say something bad about Peter David run too, but it's just because I wanna say this, because I feel like it's not only Peter David. I feel like a lot of people have misunderstood Rani and how Rani works in time, and like her character, like her evolution. And it's like every time I read her, it's like I'm reading Rani at point zero again. Like it's running from the first season of New Mutants and having another different way of looking at things. Because there are two things about the new X Factor, the new one from Peter David, that impressed me. And one was when Rani went pregnant and she was chasing by wolves. All around, all the seasons were very weird to me. Like you were very gratuitous, and it was just like showing Rani being afraid of something biblical, which I understand because it's in her character. It's something like demons chasing her. But it's like Rani has had a whole process or accepting that, or accepting her form in New Mutants, and it's like it erased it. And at the same time, in New Mutants, there was a lot of queer subtext with Rani and Danny that are finally getting some of that probably in the movie. It's being talked about. I don't have a lot of expectations for that movie, but if that's here, that's there, I want to see it. That concrete thing, I want to see it. So yay. So that's great. And I feel like Rani had a whole process of rejecting all physical intimacy, not only LGBT stuff, but all in New Mutants. That was very hard for her. She felt like everything was a sin. And that was a process that had, overcome over New Mutants, and how that's something that she learned about herself, and that she learned about, about relating to other people, and about what she might want. And then you have Richter coming out to her and she being a total jerk, like being extremely homophobic in X Factor just because she's religious. And I think that loses the point of where Rani is in that moment. I know Marvel doesn't do really the continuity and characters stuff a lot, but it just kind of felt like going backwards with her. And I feel like that has happened other times. And I also want to say that that's not the case for every character. Obviously, the character work of Peter David with some characters is amazing. It's something that gave them so much and so wide, like in the case of Jamie or Richter. But in the case of Rani, I'm like, why did you mistreat her so much? it's because you have this idea of this person who is very religious and etc. I don't know. I feel like he put a lot of weight on her that was very not working for me. And I don't know if you all want to say anything about this or about any other thing that you reminded in this conversation.
Well, I think that when it comes to Wolfsbane, like she's a really multi-layered character, right? And a lot of writers don't know what to do with that. Like, if you have to boil her down, she's a very religious person, but at the same time, she had religion weaponized against her by Reverend Craig growing up. And that internal contradiction, it manifests in her wolf form. And there's a million things you can do with that, right? But writers tend to struggle with where to go because they have a hard time looking past, well, she's this religious naif, so to speak. And because there's such a tendency in mainstream superhero comics to want to take characters back to their default setting, whoever they are, at some point or another, like, she just keeps getting stuck in that cycle. Like, I hear what you're saying, and I totally agree with you about that. But then, the unfortunate truth is that every character in comics is in the second act, and they're all, no matter what you can, do with them, they're always going to default back to that second act at some point, unless the comic's canceled forever, which, could be 4 issues if you're Marvel and don't support your comics by minority writers or whatever. So, not that I have a bugaboo about that or anything, but Gabriel, you're fixing to say something.
No, I was just agreeing with you for the most part about all of that. The one thing about Rain that stuck out to me, and granted, I read the X Factor issues before I went back and read her time in New Mutants. But what Duna was saying about the queer subtext is part of the problem with it being subtext is it was never fully conceptualized. And for me, the queer subtext and her visceral homophobic response to seeing Richter and Shatterstar embraced don't necessarily conflict if this is something that she never fully accepted about herself because it never came to fruition. Especially considering where she was at that time. She joined X Factor after having an affair with a student and then left the X Factor to join a mutant kill squad and then got pregnant by a god who up and vanished. So she wasn't exactly in the most stable point of her life. And then she goes to find her ex-boyfriend and finds him with another man. To me, it didn't make such a clash. But then again, I saw that first, and I didn't have that imprint in my mind about what Wolfsbane should be and what progress she had went through. But I agree with what you were saying is that no matter what progress someone goes through, almost always they end up regressing, sometimes multiple times. Even in the comics now, if you look at Laura, she's gone back and forth between X-23 and Wolverine more times than Wolverine has had a child. So it's really hard to keep track about what state someone is in.
Wait, is it more times than Wolverine's had a child or more times than Wolverine's killed one of his children?
Are they not the same?
Let's not ask Dakin.
Also, we got 2 comments from Ross also about which stuff impacted him. So I'm gonna read some of that. The first series with Wild Portasio on art, and well, they come up against Apocalypse and the introduction of the Ascani, and sending baby Nathan to the future and all that stuff. I think that's great. I thought I was gonna be more disappointed at Apocalypse's first introduction. I don't know why, but I thought I was gonna be more like, this is a story that is, not very original. But I like it a lot because he was like playing with with mutants valuing themselves. He was playing with that to push his own survival of the fittest stuff.
Well, I think that story was a fitting end to the original E05 era too, because it tied up so many plot threads and ignored others, and but it did a really good job of putting a bow on that era and paving the way for the first mutation of the title.
Does anyone remember with Apocalypse that first issue where he appears at the very end? It's a paste-in job. They drew Apocalypse and pasted him over whoever the original writer had introduced. Does anybody remember who the original villain was under the pasted-in Apocalypse?
Are you talking about in number 6?
Yeah. When he appears to that end, I can't think of the original writer's name now, which is a shame. But
Bob Layton.
Layton, yeah. The incoming team had designed Apocalypse, and he'd had a plan for some other villain, and they just glued him over in re-dialogue.
I don't know.
But I can't remember for the life of me what the original was.
I think it's great that Apocalypse was first shown as someone that wants mutants to survive, even if in that weird way of like exterminating humanity or something like that. In Louis Simonson run, Apocalypse, even if in his weird way, is trying to make mutants survive. So that's something that connects him with Apocalypse today more than I thought it would do. I was reading it like I thought it would be more disconnected with today, but it's pretty connected with the character today.
Yeah.
And okay, Ross also commented about the all-new X Factor run with Gambit and Lorna and Quicksilver. I like it a lot. I know it hasn't had a lot of fans. I think it's very, I don't know, it's forgettable, but I like it.
I could probably go back and give it another chance. I read the first 2 issues and I wasn't feeling it. I don't know if it was any one particular thing about it. It just felt kind of hodgepodgey to me. And it just
I think I might have had a different opinion on it if it didn't follow immediately after X Factor Investigations. And I absolutely love the series. It's my favorite X series to ever exist. But the ending went in a lot of directions with a lot of the characters. Someone became a god, someone was their own grandfather, and then we just go to this completely separate thing and ignore all of that. And it kind of just left me going, wait, what's happening?
We're still ignoring the fact that Siren became a goddess.
We really are. She's back having a party.
Yep.
Never didn't become a god. Just now she's having some drinks.
When did All New come out? Because this is all new to me.
It was directly after X Factor Investigation.
It was the first or second wave of Marvel, all new Marvel books era, like 2013, 14, somewhere in there. It didn't last really long, maybe 18 issues.
Yeah. Like, just in case you're not all just making up a book to.
Gambit was in an X Factor book for a short while.
Gambit was in an X Factor book. Cypher had relations with a robot. It was a book that happened. I'm not sure how I feel about it happening, but it happened.
I, for once, like the visuals so much. Like this issue that is called All Girls Party and has a cover of Danger and Polaris, and I don't know who the other girl was. 3 girls having a party, and the whole issue was just them going shopping. I thought it was very wacky, but I totally bought it. Like I was reading it like, oh, this is super funny. And also Danger, which was like the Danger Room before, but then become a character, were like flirted with Polaris, which was very weird. And it was not like it wasn't like a very direct like, okay, you wanna fuck? so it was very wacky, but I found it mostly I wasn't infuriated at it. And since I have been infuriated at a lot of X Factor, I was like, I'm enjoying this. This is wacky and fun.
I really enjoyed it, but I think that at the time it just needed to be spaced out a little bit more. Because I think that when it came about, I think there's a lot of politics about the X-Men and Marvel at the time. Also, I think that they threw a random story in there. I think it was not was it Secret Wars or Secret Empire? That was kind of thrown in there for like a couple, one or two issues, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's how Sunfire came in. Just it was like near the ending, and it just was all combobulated, and it started out great. I just think that they needed to end it sooner than that they had planned, and that's just kind of how that went.
Looking over at the comments real quick, Travis, to answer your question, the original villain from X Factor 6 was supposed to be the Owl from Daredevil. Bob Layton wanted him, but he left, and Louise Simonson and Bob Harris wanted a Magneto-class villain. And thus Apocalypse was born. Sort of.
I like the Owl a lot as a character, but Bobby could just punch him. It's not really threatening.
No.
Especially, if I remember correctly, wasn't it in charge of the Alliance of Evil, which had Frenzy of all people? I cannot picture Frenzy listening to the Owl. I think Frenzy would just punt him into the next zip code. So I'm glad that change happened.
Yeah.
And it looks like Ross also answered your question, Duna, and Wanda was
Wanda.
The third character in the Girls' Night.
I think one of the reasons I like a new X Factor was because Wanda didn't do anything horrible, and that's. I'm so tired of the witch Romani woman doing something horrible that hunted some people. It's like, can we not have that? And I'm very mad that they're doing it again. I'm like, can we not have that as a plot point? Like that's real. Like I don't know. Like it feels like narratively we haven't evolved a lot in the last 200 years. When I see those things about Wanda being like the cause of all suffering in the world because she's a witch, it's like
even the offensiveness aside, it's kind of at the point like we've seen this before a lot. That's taking the offensiveness aside, which I don't think we should, but it's about time for someone else to screw up all the time.
Yeah, most definitely.
I stand. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I'm like maybe even Quicksilver is better than Wanda.
Well, he screws up all the time too. So
yeah, it's so bad, but.
Well, I always think of Colleen Coover had the short comics that took place back in the Silver Age, and Jean Grey literally just calls up Wanda on the phone while they're on the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and X-Men. It's like, do you want to go out and be in the city? Hang out in the city. And they go out and they go shopping and they have burgers. And it's like they're completely separated from what their teams are doing. And then you have, everything, I think, since West Coast Avengers, you have Wanda's going to destroy the Earth. Wanda's going to kill all the mutants. Wanda's going to, these kind of lapses. Like maybe they should get her on some medication.
Maybe get her into some therapy. Doc Samson seems to be around all over the place.
So I do stand corrected. It wasn't a Secret Empire. It was Axis. That was how.
No wonder we all forgot about it. Womp womp womp.
I actually really liked it because that was the time that I was coming back into comics after like a decade off. So it was like, oh, all this new stuff is happening and blah blah. Okay, anyways.
Okay, so we are in the hour mark, so I think we can talk about the new X Factor now. Okay, so it came out this week, and it's by Leah Williams and David Baldeon, and you can all find it in your local comic shops or by email or whatever. And we're gonna talk about it now. I want to hear all of your impressions before I do mine, because I'm not sure about mine.
I'll go first since I actually did review it for the site. and to be as least spoilery as possible, I found it to be very reminiscent of a television pilot. The pacing of it, you introduce your main character, you come across what the problem is, then you go through each of the characters that will be joining. They each get a chance to shine, and then it gets wrapped up with a neat bow, with a lot left hanging to continue for further issues or further episodes. I absolutely loved it. I think that it was rough at points, but I think that's part of the charm, since you have a team of mutants who are just various different kinds of a mess. And I am excited to see how their messes work together with their mission. So I was psyched about this title from the moment I found out Leah Williams was writing it. I'm a huge fan. I got even more excited when I saw the roster. I was excited for a huge queer cast going on to this. There's 2 out characters, I believe, 3 out characters out of 6. So it's a 50% queer team. So I'm stoked from the get-go. And I was really expecting to be let down after the long COVID-forced wait. I was expecting my anticipation to be the death of it, but I was not let down, and I loved it.
I actually loved this one too. I was kind of looking at the cast and I was, how can I say, like, not overwhelmed at all, kind of underwhelmed. But I ended up loving it. I mean, I'm here for it. I loved all the different type of, like, they made me actually feel for North Star, which, to be honest, I've never felt anything for him, but anything ever. My only complaint is what they did with Polaris. I feel like they made her. I think they reverted her back a little bit. I feel like they made her way younger than what she's appeared, but I do also kind of like that they made her into kind of like, yeah, I'm still messed up. So I kind of like that too, but I don't know if it was more the art that just made her seem really young and kind of naive. I don't want to say naive, but just kind of like, it just seems like she went 10 years back. To kind of, but we'll see. I mean, it was one issue, so I'm trying to find like the one thing that I can critique out of the book. But other than that, I kind of loved it.
I found myself pleasantly surprised with it. I am actually not familiar with Leah Williams as a writer, so I didn't know what to expect coming in. I love David Baldeon's art from Domino, so I knew I was gonna get my visual money's worth, if nothing else. And then several of the characters are just kind of blank slates to me. I don't know anything about Prodigy. iBoy, he's been around for a good while, but usually in the background and just kind of underdeveloped. And I haven't had any reading contact with Dakin since he was drowned by his dad. So
Which time,
right? So anyway, but like, I actually love the fact, Gabriel, that you referred to it as a pilot, because that fits what I was feeling perfectly. I just didn't have a word for it. But it gives you your characters, it sets up a mystery, it sets up the dynamic of the book. And I mean, it really feels like almost a one and done in the sense of just how well it accomplishes itself in the 3 acts of its story. I agree with you, Brian, that some of the shots with Polaris and with Rachel, they looked younger than they should have, and that's just Baldeon's art. He just kind of draws most people like that, and that's fine because I'm not an artist. He's drawing better than I could have, and it doesn't bother me. But at this point, with all of the Dawn of X titles, there's so many now, right? And I've just found myself wondering going into this, like, what else is there to really explore in this world at this point? It turns out there's a pretty fair amount of stuff to explore. And yeah, I'm excited for this book. I wasn't sure if I was going to be in the market to buy number 2. I mean, I'll get 3 and 4 because they're going to cross over with X of Swords, or Cross of Swords, I mean. But yeah, I think this is going on my sub list. Travis, how about you?
So I guess I'm the opposite. I liked docking in the hotel and trying to get information. That was it. I don't like that they've jobbed Aurora on this to motivate North Star and everyone else's story, especially in a first issue. That just seems tacky to me. It seems a little lazy to me. I don't like the redesign of Blob as he shows up in this book. I didn't like that the characters don't, and they acknowledge they don't really have a reason to be together. But there's not, they're like, well, we're together now, so we're together now. That doesn't make a lot of sense. No one has ever found a group to work with just because of that. I also think the book highlighted my problem with this government, this Krakoa government. They created a mutant CIA before, like a year at least, 2 years now, before they created a group that will look for missing persons or investigate murders. There's no one in the Krakoan government set up to investigate murders, but they have people who can go run illegal drugs into countries that don't want them. That's not a good thing, to me. That's not a good look.
That's actually a really good observation. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So I felt like, I just felt like, if you were living in that country, if you're living on Krakoa, to realize, like, if you get murdered, there's no one to investigate your murder. I did feel for North Star at the beginning when he was very frustrated about the resurrection lines and that. So I guess that too also worked for me. And I like Leah Williams. I like the artist. So I'm hoping, I'll give it another issue, maybe 2 issues. Well, I'll give it 1 issue, not the other, because it's going to be a crossover and I'm not bothering. But I'll give it the 2nd issue and see where they are with things before I really make up my mind.
So do you think that because when somebody, like another mutant is murdered, they can just come back? Maybe that's why they didn't have one before?
Well, the murderer's still out there, though. I mean, there's a lot of, and it's not helping the families or loved ones. Their policing in that government just seems very willy-nilly.
Yeah. One thing which, to me, it kind of both is a plus because it kind of makes sense to me why they didn't have it before. But at the other side, it kind of seems a weird thing that they don't have something, they haven't acknowledged this yet, is it's murders off the island, so it's kind of like less of their issue. But at the same time, you literally brought in every supervillain you've ever had, and you don't have anything for if they just decide to stop murdering people.
There's a lot of murderers on that island.
And there's no one has murdered, apparently. You got Celine grabbing tea and Dawkins stabbing himself in the head, and no one's murdering anyone on the island, apparently, which I guess is why they didn't have an investigative force. But really, no one has murdered anyone? It seems a bit odd.
Going to our last episodes, not even Sinister is murdering anyone.
Yeah, it's impressive.
That's out of character. He must be like, I should murder someone, but
isn't
I'm
he
in the government?
Ross seemed to have a comment to kind of answer what you were saying, Travis. He says he disagrees with you. The feeling he gets with X Factor is the characters all need some direction, and this new status quo, and this galvanizes them. And I can kind of see that when they first introduce all the new characters, when Lorna is just chilling at a bar and she grabs North Star, and then they kind of say, who are they taking? It kind of shows that Prodigy, Rachel, and Travis are lost. Kind of along the same lines of what they did with Fallen Angels, but executed differently. In my personal opinion, executed better in recruiting them to their mission.
Yep.
Yeah, I definitely didn't hate that how they put the team together. I thought it was kind of unique. It's like, hey, you have nothing to do. We're all bored. We all kind of kick ass. Let's just create something. Like, I don't feel like that's
something useful. Stop having an orgy.
Yeah, like let's. Yeah, I don't know. Like for me, it was kind of unique and kind of like what I could see happening in real life. Like I've done that. I'm like, I'm bored. Let's go do something, kind of thing. Like, even if it is just to like get myself in trouble, like what the hell? Why not?
You've gotten bored and started investigating murders. I'm curious now about your life.
Okay, so actually, that's we don't got to know.
What was happening in Phoenix, sir?
I don't know. I don't live in Phoenix.
Oh, wherever you was it not Phoenix? Okay,
No,
I knew it was
Now.
no. But I was at work last night, and I worked the knock shift, and we heard like really weird noises, ghosts, and so we went and investigated, and we couldn't find what it was. So.
I mean, I would see a bunch of mutants investigating some paranormal stuff.
I would read that.
Well, there was the New Mutants run that was a mini series about a year or so
Oh,
ago.
Dead Souls. Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's one of my favorite recent New Mutants run, and I didn't realize.
Mm-hmm.
I personally loved it. You can hate me all you want, but at least someone is writing Ileana well in some place. Not in all places that they wrote, but in some place.
So,
what do you
Duna,
think
what is? Oh, sorry, Travis.
Everyone is very interested about I think about this book.
what
I
did
like the tone a lot, and I think the reason why I like this tone, this might sound weird or very basic, but I like that the dialogues were sometimes pretty long, and that's not as usual now. Like now we have shorter dialogues in general, and I like that there was some, facts
Yeah.
stuff and everything,
Yeah,
because
like-
that made it feel more,
that is a lot of dialogue for a modern comic for one page.
Yes, and I feel like that helped it with this whole stuff that we've been talking on all this show about melodrama and about characters talking too much about their personal things and being like that thing that also is very common in the Peter David in both runs. That is like they explain a lot of things, even if not explained explicitly, but they talk a lot. And so I get the idea about they're talking, and I get like the mood of like, I don't know. I like the mood a lot. I like the way Leah is telling me this story, how she chooses to place the dialogues, how she chooses to interact with the characters, how sometimes, as Gabriel said, there's some fast pacing stuff, and then there's some stuff that you have to, and I need to read with more attention. And I like that. I'm not sure about the characterization of everyone. Personally, I wasn't really in with Rachel. Like I wasn't feeling her like in in any line almost, except the moment when she was psychically searching through Aurora stuff. That moment felt more Rachel for me, but it was like a glimpse, so I want more. But it's not like I thought she was badly written, but more like I want more of her. I want less like phrases that any other character could say and more Rachel. And I don't know. I felt like most complaints I had could be solved within 3 issues. Like it's the first issue of a run. I don't know what they're gonna do. Like maybe in 3 issues I'm gonna be like, maybe because in 3 issues Richter is gonna appear in the book. So maybe it's that. That's what I thought. I didn't like some stuff, but I'm not bothered by it because I feel like it read very fast and it read like a TV pilot. Like the review of Gabriel was very good. Like everyone should go read it and then decide based on that review if they want to read the book or not. It's a very good review for deciding that.
Thank you.
Because it's non-spoiler. It's very good for deciding that.
The one thing that also excites me the most about X Factor is we're getting queer characters written by an openly queer writer. And to me, it is clear on the page while they're talking about it. The first that I messaged some of my queer friends who are X-Men fans the moment I was reading it, because the disaster bisexual bit that they talk about with Dakin being a disaster bisexual, and they don't need that on the team, and it was just so hilarious and in a way relatable, that I loved it, and a lot of my queer friends loved it as well, and I'm excited to see what Leah Williams is going to be bringing forward more with these characters.
I need to sit with what I felt. That line was amazing, and the characterization of Daken from that moment on was amazing. But I need to sit with what I felt before, because like before that moment, uh, he was like, you know, very predatory with Polaris in a moment, and I felt weird with that. But then I was like, we have met Daken like this for 10 years or 50 years, so he's not gonna be a different character now, just cause he's written better. And then I got the better part. And the rest of the book, I absolutely love Daken's characterization. But that moment was like, I was very on guard for that. But then I realized I could put my guards down.
Mm-hmm. Dakin has been very problematic for a very long time, and he has done a lot of questionable things. I mean, there's a flat out scene where it fades to black, but he may or may not have sexually assaulted a woman in an alleyway once, but it fades to black before we can know for sure. But that being said, I feel like as of right now, the way Leah is writing him, it's not erasing his problematic past, but it is giving him the chance to do something different. Because I was also very on guard when he was on the team, because I was worried that it was going to be another situation of us all magically forgetting how really, really bad this bad guy character is. But he still has some of that, and it's still there. But it might be a potential for growth.
I saw that. I was like, in the first moment, I was very like, this makes me uncomfortable. I knew I was gonna be uncomfortable if something like that happened, and that's normal because it's his character from till now. But then the rest of the book felt very great with that. And I have to give props to like getting a character that is complicated to write in that way. Like I wouldn't know how to do it. I wouldn't know how to do it fairly, mostly. And okay, we got a lot of comments, but a lot were ours.
Well, Ross wants to know when we're going to talk about the real star of X Factor #1, Amazing Baby. The baby werewolf, excuse me.
The baby was amazing.
Yes.
I love the baby werewolf, and I've noticed from everything that's being spoken on X Twitter that I am in the minority when I say I don't like the name at all. And I think I am the only one who doesn't like it, because everyone else is losing their minds over how awesome Amazing Baby is and how awesome the name Amazing Baby is. And I'm just kind of, I could have named him Sparky.
I'm kind of with Gabe here. Like I'm not sold on the name. However, as the character, loved it. The scene where Rachel is landing in Amazing Baby ended up taking a poo right there, and she was like, "Really, right here?" That is so relatable. As somebody who has to like take their dog out in a couple minutes, like he poops in the most insane places as he's going. So I completely understand. I loved it. It was relatable.
Okay, so I'm thinking about what to ask you all for closing the show. Maybe maybe also we have already done this, like talk about this stuff that matters to us, but also if you find someone that is like okay, I'm interested in X Factor because I have read the new one in X or Y way. What would you recommend from the old one that connects this with the new one? So maybe we can like talk about the new one in a different way and also close what all the things we've been talking about.
Huh. Well, we beat this horse to death, but I'm going to go back to X Factor Investigations again because, you've got the investigative angle that kind of connects the two together. I mean, yeah, obviously the scenario is different now, but it's also very, very new reader friendly. And I think if you had somebody coming in cold, that would be a great place to drop them in. And they're in for a real treat.
I'm going to follow what you said, but kind of take it back a little bit because there was, I don't know if it was written by Peter David because I'm not always the best with creators, but prior to X Factor, when he was X Factor Investigations, there was a 5-issue miniseries called Maddox, which pretty much is the setup for X Factor Investigations. And I think that particularly if you like the whole television pilot feel of the first issue, I feel like that might be a good place to jump in because it sets you up for X Factor Investigations. It's when Multiple Man starts recruiting Siren and Wolfsbane and Strong Guy, and their first case as a team before leading into X Factor.
Yeah, that's a good point. That really is the starting point for X Factor Investigations. And it's a really good miniseries.
Yeah.
Brian, what about you?
I'm trying to think. I actually like treating each of the volumes differently and separated. I actually try not to connect them. I'm actually a lot like Gabe. I don't really pay too much attention to the creative team for several reasons, especially now. So for me, I would have to go back to, if you're a new reader, I would definitely say that Investigations would probably be the best place to start because it is a great jumping on point. You don't need a lot of background information on any of the characters because they build it up pretty well. I forgot that End Day just happened, so it took me back. So you may have to Google that if you're not familiar with that to read that series. But read them all. They're all great. Just read them all.
Can't disagree with that. Travis?
I don't think I would recommend an earlier X Factor run. If they were really excited by this new issue, I would either recommend something by the same writer or the same artist, of which we have had many great comics lately, or something with one of the characters, if a certain character reached out to him, because these characters don't really show up in the earlier runs. I think it would serve somebody better if they really like Daken in this issue. They should go read another comic with Daken. If they really like North Star, they should go read another comic with North Star. To me,
I think that's a really valid point, actually, because I mean, if you like this X Factor, and then you go back and read one of the other, and you don't know what's going on with Krakoa and all that, you might be a little confused. So You're right; it might be better to branch out amongst the characters themselves rather than the title.
One thing I do want to say about going out and branching with the characters is it's a lot of characters that haven't had real good like roles where they've been important. Prodigy has been left out of the X-Men for about a decade. iBoy has only really been in Wolverine and the X-Men and Generation X. It definitely has that same thing that really drew me to X Factor Investigations, where it seems like Leah created a roster of the characters that was forgotten when everyone else drafted their teams. So honestly, like I was thinking when you were saying this, like what would I suggest to someone if they read this Daken and they really liked him? I would actually say don't read anything else with Daken because it might make you hate him more because he's not a good person.
it's a good hate, though.
Sometimes, maybe, possibly.
Unless they're trying to spin him as a good person suddenly, and I think that's a damaged look at it. But he was introduced as a bad person. He was always, he was the self-destructive force in his own title.
I would say the only other time I felt sympathetic to Daken was that run where he was interacting with the Fantastic Four a lot, and I believe the writer had come out and said that, and I might be making this up, but the subtext at least was very much hinted towards maybe he having a thing with Johnny Storm, and that it was the first time I ever saw Dakin have emotions. And I wish I could figure out what the issue was, but
Yeah, Mark, who did she did confirm that
Okay.
they were having a thing.
So like that was the only other time that I ever felt like, you know what, Dakin is a human being and shouldn't be hit by a bus. But a lot of the other characters, he can still get hit by a bus. You're right. He'll be fine. He'll heal. It's Krakoa. He'll come back. But a lot of the characters haven't had as much time in the spotlight as I wish they would.
Sure. Okay.
Which was the writer? Was Marjorie Liu?
Liu, yes.
Okay. I just like her a lot, so I was also one of the things that I like about Daken, but Daken is not really touched a lot, is that he's very like kind to Laura, even if he's mean to everyone else. And I think that's a point with someone can connect with the character, because it's kind of fun family. It's not really, it's family in some weird way. So that's
and his scenes with Gabby.
Okay, so we got some recommendations of Domino, the Domino run for the artists and for the, it was a great run. And
sadly cut.
Yes. And all new X Factor, Rose said that is pretty reader friendly, like you can read it without knowing too much about the characters. And I have to agree, although I don't know if you're gonna get out of it like with a really compelling experience, but I like it a lot. It's weird because I'm here like, but I like it a lot. It's very fun. And as for me, I'm gonna go against everyone and say that if you like this new one and the concept and the way it drives you, you may like some of the other ones. You may not, but you may like, because it's about some characters of the X-Men or similarly that are very forgotten and left behind and etc. And that has happened a number of times with the X Factor runs. And maybe you're interested in reading some characters that you don't know at all, and with a tone that is more like, this thing that they're melodramatic, they're very movie, they're very like chaotic and that stuff, and that's great. Although my favorite one, which is the Louis Simonson run, is not like that much, especially because it starts with the original 5. So this is something that you have to have some interest in the X-Men aside from this book. If not, maybe you're not finding that much of it, even if there's these teenagers and there's more looks and there's other stuff that you're gonna find interesting. And I don't know, I don't know if what else I would recommend. Domino is a great one, and maybe the Multiple Man miniseries, just because I like the tone that is very much. I remember the tone was also like very moody and the kind of dialogues that this comic had, but it's not very teen book, so maybe you don't like it because it's not teen book. It's the teen of Jamie Young himself. Okay, so I don't know if anyone has anything else to add, but I think we made it. And I hope everyone that comes here found something that they're interested in and read some X Factor, be it the new one, the old one, the investigation, and finds their own perspective. Because if anything else, they're very broad. So thank you everyone for watching and everyone for coming. Bye.
Bye.